Let's start with the definition of hypervisor, because it really is a pretty key component of a cloud implementation. The hypervisor is the virtual machine monitor, so this is really the heart of what allows us to run multiple logical machines on top of one piece of physical infrastructure to better understand how the hypervisor works. So let's go take a quick look at the mechanics of virtualization. We have had a virtual machine around for a very long time. In fact, it may well have run them on your own physical machine, and virtualization is a pretty key tenet of the way cloud services run. So of course, there's much more to the cloud than just having virtualization. We still need those cloud characteristics such as on-demand self-services and resource pooling. But when we leverage those characteristics, we are very frequently using virtualization and virtualization service, particularly when we have talk about the infrastructure as a service. So when we look at the virtualization, inevitably we do still have a layer of physical infrastructure back in the first module. So I showed you some of the data centers of Google and Microsoft, and there is still lack of machines that are underlying physical infrastructure. So we have a virtualization layer. So this is what the hypervisor is able to sit there and provide an abstraction between the physical infrastructure and logical infrastructure that sits on top of it. So this is going to be on our virtual machine. So now that logical infrastructure means that when you do remote into into your server, you will still need it to see the network card and hard disk and other virtual devices. They don't necessarily map directly to that underlying physical infrastructure, but it does mean that when you are in there in the machine, it looks pretty much like a normal operating system, because of course that's what we have. The operating system sits on top of the logical infrastructure and it supports the application that run with this. Now when we talk about the virtualization, we inevitably have multiple virtual machines that run on top of the physical infrastructure. Sometimes it can be thousands of machines, and in fact as such as the capacity of the underlying physical infrastructure and the scale of the logical machine that are being provided and will determine how many get provisions and within the one physical machine. The hypervisor is what keeps virtual machine 1 separated from the virtual machine 2, because this could belong to totally different customers, and this is much of a premise of resource pool in that the other cloud characteristics. So we looked at the first module. So we are going to share the physical infrastructure between the multiple customers. But what does if it goes wrong? So what happens if virtual machine one is able to break out the hypervisor, which is meant to keep it as a self-contained logical piece of infrastructure, and then access the resources from the virtual machine to because it could be catastrophic, because you could end up with one customer accessing to another customer's data, and this is not a hypothetical risk either. So let me show you. In 2015 we saw a very serious risk with a Zen hypervisor, and one of the things that made this risk is so serious that this is what AWS uses most of the customers on Amazon's cloud service as sitting top of the virtual machine and managed by the Zen. With a problem within the particular risk is that provided the potential for an attacker to break out, and one of those logical machines sitting top of the Zen supervisor and access extremely sensitive part of the underlying operating system. Now fortunately this was patched very quickly by Jan and rolled out very quickly to customers such as Amazon, but it demonstrated what is probably the biggest fear most organizations have about cloud security is that they are sharing resources with other customers. And indeed this is one of the reasons why models such as a private cloud whatever that beyond premise or with a provider or other often preferable to use the core tenant to the model which is more easily obtainable and most cost efficient model. So the Genbug is probably one of the worst we have seen in terms of impact on the hypervisor, and even now the patch was very quickly. It serves as a reminder that there are some unique risks that we run services in the cloud incident such as this post a very specific risk for organizations that are decided to put their resources in the cloud. But there are another class of cloud computing risk that affects everyone regardless of whether they have put their things on the cloud or not. So let's look at the hypervisor breakout, what it means. So everything that breaks the assumption that the virtual machine can be treated like separate virtual machine, and here are some of the ways to protect against it. Keeping your virtual machine network away from your management network is a great way to secure your virtualized environment. If malware compromised your virtual machines, it won't be able to affect your hypervisor. Ideally, only you, your system administrator or virtualization provider should have access to your hypervisor console. So you need to set strict access restriction on the software to prevent unauthorized user from messing with virtual machine setting and viewing your most sensitive data. Disable unnecessary services, which is the off-the-shelf operating system will have many unnecessary services and apps that increase the attack surfaces of your virtual machines, and if you cannot tell which one is to disable, consult with a virtualization specialist. Breaking into a server room is the easiest way to compromise the hypervisor, so make sure your physical servers are behind locked doors and watched over by staff at all the time. Due to the network infestation affecting hypervisor security, installing cutting-edge firewall and intrusion preventing system is highly recommended. These security tools monitor network traffic for abnormal behavior to protect you from the network and the newest exploits. Hypervisor must be updated to defend them against the latest threat. But if you would rather spend your time on an important project, you can always entrust the security of your hypervisor to a highly experienced and certified managed service provider.